Because God has cursed me for my hubris, and my work is never finished. Brian David Gilbert, Bowser's Military Hierarchy. The Daily Grind, Chapter 164. This place has changed, Alana commented as they pulled into the parking lot of a run-down convenience store across the street from the high school. James glanced over at her, waiting for more. He was pretty sure she didn't mean the cracked plastic light facade of the plaid pantry. There's fewer cars. Everyone's a little more worried. I see at least 2 plainclothes cops. She casually arrowed her finger toward the 2 men pretending to be normal teachers, keeping her arm close to herself so it didn't draw attention from anyone outside the car. Yeah, James glanced in the back seat. I'm surprised they reopened it at all. This place is uncomfortable. A lot of kids died, Sarah said, her normal enthusiasm dampened by the words as she held a duffel bag open for frequency of sunlight. No one really ever recovers from that. They should have done more, moved the kids to other districts, covered costs, actually done more for therapy than getting one semi-mystical woman to cover the whole school. It's dumb. The city dropped the ball. Some of us died too, Frequency of Sunlight added, as she curled up inside the duffel bag and shifted her weight to be as evenly distributed as possible. I miss my brother. Hard to have fun in a place like that, James said, shrugging to Alana. You ready to go? Should we actually be doing this? She asked. Don't the dungeons sort of mimic the mood of a place? Or am I overcommitting to something I overheard a research girl say? Leaning over the back seat, Sarah draped her arms around Alana's shoulders and gave her a series of rapid pats on the head. It'll be fine. We're here now to cheer everything up, she said with a determined smile. Also, the dungeon sucked to begin with, so it's not like it could get that much... Red light! Frequency of Sunlight yelled at Sarah from the gap in the duffel bag. Yeah, holy shit, do not finish that sentence. Alana flicked the temporarily frozen Sarah on the nose as she cracked the door open and got out of the car, stretching her legs on the parking lot pavement while the others followed. James grinned as Sarah pitched forward into the Alana-sized gap before scrambling out and hauling the camera Conda's sneaking spot with her. Okay, let's go. Anesh and Deb should be waiting for us. Technically, we have permission to be here, but there's no need to spook anyone more than before, so let's not waste time. So they didn't. A brisk walk across the school's front driveway to a double door that was at the bottom of a side ramp was all it took to get them into the building. Normally the door would be locked, but Anesh was already there, having been let in himself by Lua before the main group had arrived. If any of the students spotted them, none of them said anything. But it was also late August, and the only kids here would be for summer clubs, remedial classes, or attempted graffiti. So the barren front parking lot was probably easier to sneak through than it would be for what they had to do during the school year proper. Hey, James greeted Anesh with a lithe kiss on the cheek as he led his group into the building. How's the sewer doing? So, to fill you in on what Lua shared, the dungeon has exactly this one entrance that we found. If left unattended for more than a week, it starts to send out small creatures. We've caught a few on camera. They're the little rat things. I'm pretty sure that all they do is steal stuff or break things and then run back to the dungeon. Anesh let out a sigh. It was mostly by accident, but since we know it isn't too bad after a week now, Reed's asked us to reset the place and then wait for it to do it again, so we can get some repeat data. Cracking his knuckles, Anesh led the rest of them around the corner and down the ramp that went too far underneath the building. I think he's going to ask us to keep waiting at some point, and I'm a bit bothered because this is probably the one dungeon we shouldn't be experimenting with, unless we can clear out the school, that is. Yeah, absolutely not, Deb nodded to them as they approached the bottom of the ramp. She was leaning against the wall, eyes never really leaving the battered blue metal security door set into the otherwise normal brick wall the ramp ended at. Hey guys, she offered them a wave. The school's cop says hi, James. Oh yeah, that guy. James gave an appreciative nod. I think we can probably recruit him if we ask nicely. Is that a thing we're doing now? Sarah asked. You have a noted dislike of the police. Wait, hang on, I have a noted dislike of the police. Everyone here has been shot at by the police at least once. James shook his head and made a tutting noise at his friend. Yes, but if they join us, Sarah, then they aren't the police anymore. Keep up, Slowpoke. The group didn't waste much time, instead keeping up the light banter as they passed through the door and into a space out of a horror film. The lobby of the Akashic sewer was the same kind of stained and rusted space it had always been. A couple flickering red lights casting a dark glow over sharp concrete walls and an uneven floor with a few sticky metal grates set into it. They found a clear space here and set to work inventorying what the dungeon had taken from them. Armor's still good, Anesh said, checking his duffel bag. Staves are here too. Staves? Staffs? Sticks, James answered, taking the offered body plate and slipping it around his torso. Ugh, smell here is burrowing into my eyes. Frequency's here too, Deb said, unzipping the bag that held the cameraconda and giggling as her partner shot up to flick a serpentine kiss across her lips. Arms, too. Maybe this place thinks of it as a prosthetic. She pulled out the set of mechanical arms that research had constructed for the cameracondas and helped frequency of sunlight into the harness for them, tightening straps and adjusting for comfort before adding the plug to the connector on the cameraconda's back neck. Battery's good for an hour and a half. Feel all right? The set of manipulators unfolded from frequency of sunlight's back. 4 arms, all with 2 major joints for mobility and a basic gripping tool on the end. This was still an early prototype that was being updated frequently as the engineers working on the projects tried different styles, different approaches. This one was trying to cover for the lack of actual stable lifting power with more flexibility. Frequency moved the arms a few times before carefully reaching up and ruffling her girlfriend's hair. Yes, she stated. Sarah, here. The cameraconda turned, offered, and received in return a high five. Needs work, but can feel them. Should test purples with them, Frequency stated, as Deb helped her fit a transparent camera cover over her eye before seeing to her own goggles herself. That or a book, which I'm hoping we can get for you today, James said, assisting Alana into her own armor in a similar fashion before strapping on a filter mask. Anything actually missing? I guess we'd know. It would have torn the bags away from us. Nope, looks like it's all here. Sample cases are secure too, Anesh confirmed, standing up and shouldering the bag, now with the 2 other bags emptied and packed into it. Your glasses, too. He handed a pair of dungeon tech specs from the office to Alana, one of the first sets they'd found that let someone see in infrared. Shall we get down to it? The other 5 nodded, and together they moved into formation and headed down the open hallway. The yawning dark sewer tunnel greeted them like an irate X. Immediately the piping underfoot became a navigational issue, a tripping hazard, as the uneven tubes were sometimes slick with condensation. James and Alana took point and had small flashlights pointing forward in the webbing on their armor, while in the middle of their group, Frequency of Sunlight carried 2 larger mag lights in a pair of her hands, keeping them as steady as possible on the walls around them as she slithered. Overhead, the ceiling closed in at odd times, the chaos of different-sized pipes sometimes leading to large, almost organic-looking bulges in the faux ceiling that required the human portion of the party to duck under them, especially Alana. As they moved, they had to navigate around the occasional steady drip of some bizarre liquid or another, or step carefully over a jagged rent in the floor below them. This place has changed too, Alana said. Way more attention to detail. I hate it. She stated with a stomp of her boot that eliminated a skittering fist-size green cockroach thing. A pathetic single red spark jutted out of the corpse under her foot and up into the palm of her hand. It's getting better, I guess, James muttered back, and then he paused as his voice echoed off the walls and something scratched overhead in response. He hissed at everyone, a sharp psst, as he held out an arm to Alana. The group waited, tensed up, as the scratching on metal and ceramic pipes escalated and shifted, before suddenly a chunk of one of those pipes almost right overhead shattered outward. If James hadn't insisted on masks and goggles for everyone, it might have been a problem. It might have been a serious problem, as a shard of ceramic stopped half an inch from his eye, buried in the protective plastic. The thing that dropped out of the gap was far less of a problem. A howling, rat-shaped creature, roughly the size of a small dog. It had wiry fur and a gaping, sucking crater in its chest that glowed with a cherry-red heat. It also silenced itself and froze mid-air as Frequency locked onto it. Then, Deb, mid-panic yell, nailed it in the neck with a metal pole, slamming it into the wall where Alana landed a second hit on it with her own staff, smashing its skull in. A spray of red, blood and sparks alike, flowed out of it, painting the pipes and hands of the participants. "Ow," James said, plucking the ceramic shard out of the eyepiece of his goggles. "Yep," Alana declared vehemently. "Still hate this place. I was right." She glanced over at Deb, who was bent half over, clutching her chest and panting as the adrenaline quickly wore off. "You all right there? Need a minute?" "I'm good," the other woman replied. "This just isn't something I do very often." "You're in the office every week," Anesh spoke quietly, no one seeing his raised eyebrows in the dark of the surrounding pipes. Deb's glare, though, was highlighted by one of the flashlights Frequency was carrying, the thin whir of motors as she moved her adapted arms around, drifting through the air near them. "Nothing in the office has ichor in it, Anesh," Deb gasped out. "Or any of that." She jabbed her staff toward the corpse in a violent point. "I mean, don't ruin it for her," Alana cut James off. "Let her have her hopes and dreams. We ready to keep moving?" They were, and they did, making decent time considering the poor footing and number of roaches they had to keep smashing. It wasn't long before they came across something out of the ordinary, though. The pipes in front of them splayed out, and if they hadn't had lights on them, they might not have noticed until it was too late. The pipes, both above and below, took sudden 90-degree turns. The ceiling was suddenly so high overhead they may as well have been outside. And the floor, well, the floor was gone. In front of them was a 30-foot wide pit, with pipes like organic vines making a thin rim of walkway around the edge, and just an empty hole in the center of the room. Frequency of sunlight pivoted her flashlights down toward the empty space, and was rewarded with dots of light playing off the walls, but when she angled them deeper, the darkness just swallowed up the glow. There was nothing. "Bottomless pit," James commented, like this was something he saw every day. "Neat." His voice was drier than chalk dust. "This is new," Alana said, standing next to him. "You didn't warn me about this." "In our defense, we haven't seen this before," Anesh said. "The dungeon is growing. Won't be long before it's more than just a straight line to an exit." He shook his head. "Gentrification comes for everyone, I guess." "Snark is James' role," Frequency told him. "Look, liquid." She tilted a manipulator and pointed a flashlight toward the middle of the pit. Sure enough, there was a thin streamer of some kind of fluid cascading down. The bottom, if there was one, was so far away it wasn't making a sound as it flowed through. Anesh had already unzipped his bag when Deb spoke up. "I know you wanted to take samples, but, how?" She inched out toward the ledge, carefully holding onto the slick pipes around the walls as best she could. "That's got to be 15 feet out at most. We don't have 15-foot-long sticks." "Damn, even my D&D experience wouldn't have prepared me for this," James quipped. Anesh considered. "We could get Frequency to freeze a pole midway over the—" "Absolutely not," the Camerconda spoke up. "No, bad." "Yeah, I'm with her," James agreed. "Don't worry, Anesh, there will be other strange fluids. Come on, let's get going. We still have to skirt around this thing and not die." He sighed, looking out over the pit. "Is this a bad time to say I'm terrified of heights?" "Everyone is terrified of heights," Deb muttered. "Everyone who says they aren't is terrified of telling the truth." "I'm going to pretend that's a medical diagnosis of humanity. All right, I'll go first. Catch me if I fall." James rolled his shoulder, adjusting the position of his armor slightly before he took a cautious step, and then another, forcing himself to move, knowing that there were people behind him, and he couldn't freeze. It's the only reason that he actually managed to keep going. He mostly just clung to the wall, heart hammering faster and faster, didn't look behind him, shuffled his feet with as little lifting as possible. The pipes underfoot weren't exactly wet, but they were thin. There were only 2 or 3, none of them easy to stand on. Behind him he heard movement as the others began to follow, single file. But James didn't look back, just kept his eyes forward and kept moving, until he hit the problem. "Hey!" he called back, stopping as his fingers found something strange in the harsh glow of his flashlight. "There's a door here." "Don't fucking open it!" Anesh yelled from behind him. "I know that," James replied. "I just wanted to warn everyone." He slid past the door, doing his best to not touch the handle, which still sensed his passing and offered a glittering red 10, the cost in stolen lives, to pass. The door was a smooth metal, almost clean compared to everything else down here. He was another 5 feet past when the scream came from overhead. Something his size, shot down past him, leaving a terrifyingly unstable trail of disturbed air behind it. James didn't see what it was, but he heard Deb and Anesh yelling from behind him, and more importantly, he heard the screeched word of whatever had just dive-bombed him. "Trespasser!" it squeaked at him in a voice that sounded like it hurt to use. There was a muffled thump, and then everything was quiet again. "I missed it," Alana called out. "I opened the door." Anesh's voice was less panicked than it would be if the door had been full of problems, so James relaxed a bit, while Anesh continued. "I'm going to fall back to the back of the line, clean this one out. It's just a closet, nothing moving in there." James inched his foot forward, desperately trying to avoid looking over his shoulder, and mostly failing. He was 10 feet from the tunnel's exit, not quite exactly on the other side as the entrance, and all he had to do now was not fall. Straining his ears for any sound of something else falling from the sky at him, he crept forward bit by bit until finally his hands met only air and he pitched himself forward into the empty tunnel. "Oh, thank God, ground!" he sighed, and started to relax until the dungeon reminded him of where he was, and an inhuman arm, dripping with clear slime and pretending to be part of the pipes on the wall, unfolded one of its dozen joints and tried to wrap long, dangerous fingers around his throat. James's staff clattered to the ground as he brought his hands up to catch the thing. His still not quite fully healed fingers held askew as he tried to keep them away from anything that was going on here. He kept himself from freaking out, despite not being able to let go or risk letting the thing kill him. Instead, he just matched his strength to it and held on without protest. Compared to standing over a bottomless pit, this was practically meditative. He held on right up until Alana slid around the side of the pit herself, saw what was going on, and started snapping emaciated elbows with her own staff, going down the line calmly and deliberately until the arm stopped moving and a flow of red poured into her palm. "You take me to the nicest places," she told James as she helped him up. "Hey, is my memory still effed up, or have we never actually gone on a date that didn't involve punching?" "We went out for a nice coffee that one time," James said, trying and failing to not sound defensive. "Yeah, that's kind of bad now that you say it. Want to go on a date?" he asked. "You're adorable," Alana said, moving him aside to make room for Deb and Frequency, the nurse helping her Camerconda friend stay stable on the ledge. "And yes, but we should invite Nesh." "Invite me where?" Anesh asked as he joined them. "We'll tell you later. Ready to keep going?" James asked. "Yeah, did this place get bigger?" Deb questioned. "Looks like." James looked down the tunnel ahead of them. "How'd the room go?" he asked Anesh quickly. 14 little green bits, Anesh said. "Enough for at least one book, maybe more. Got lucky." James sighed and regretted it as the smell refreshed itself in his nose. Even through the mask, it was like rotten eggs and stale piss was just the least offensive part of the atmosphere down here. "All right, let's go, and try not to tire ourselves out. We still have a job to do here." They kept on, dealing with the occasional suicidal rat thing, ignoring any doors that Alana couldn't peek through with the infrared glasses she'd brought, and generally just trying to avoid touching anything. Once, Sarah felt something fall into her hair, and they spent about 10 minutes making sure there weren't brainworms trying to burrow into her skull. It was probably a false alarm, but in here, nobody wanted to take that chance. A few times, Anesh stopped them to fill sample vials with the liquids from the pipes that there were breaches in that he could get to. The strange blue goo that was easy to spot by its glow, the alarmingly radioactive green sludge, and at one point, a substance leaking out of the end of a pipe hanging overhead that appeared to be a perfect facsimile of sloppy Joe meat. All of them, especially the last one, went into sealed lead cases, just in case. Twice they opened doors to rooms they could look into and confirm were empty. Anesh and Sarah answered the violent questions on the walls and harvested the sparks from them. When they came to a familiar dirt floor, air full of spores and an actual choice in what direction to go, Sarah filled Alana in on the changes the dungeon was making here, while Anesh took yet another sample, and the rest of them stood guard. There didn't seem to be anything hostile here, yet, but there was never any sense in taking a chance in the sewer. In that weird soil and mushroom cavern, just off to the side from the exit point where it turned back into concrete-floored tunnel, the group spotted a carved-out space, where the floor had been turned into a moat of that blue goo, and in the center of it a thin platform with a pedestal on it sat. "Alright, so what does that do?" Alana asked. "We didn't poke it last time," James said, staring at it, "'cause it looks like a trap." "I want to poke it," Alana stated, nodding to herself. "Even if it's a trap," she added. "Well, we do have 6 people here," Sarah said, elbowing James in the side of his armor. "Should be safe-ish? Safe adjacent. Go for it." "I honestly have no idea why you would think that, but yeah, sure, go for it." James adjusted his grip on his weapon and turned to the others. "Frequency, eye on Alana, please. Deb, Anesh, that side. Sarah and I'll watch the exit. If anything comes up out of the dirt, someone yell. If anything comes from past the weird trap, you yell, Alana." James waited as they got into position, Sarah standing next to him with an eager little bounce on her feet. "Curious about this too, uh-huh?" he asked, and she just gave him a happy nod. "Alright, hit it. Alana, please don't fall in." Before he'd finished the last sentence, Alana had taken 3 large steps and leapt across the small moat. She landed near perfectly on the dirt pillar in the middle of it. Stabilizing herself wasn't too hard, and then she pressed a gloved hand down into the misshapen depression on the pedestal. James risked a quick glance over his shoulder at her, and caught the tail end of a light show. A small swarm of purple sparks this time, dancing in the air, before vacuuming their way into the back of Alana's hand. And then nothing happened. "Okay, nothing happened," Alana called out. "Just purple sparks. What are those for?" she asked, turning and showing off in a standing leap to fling herself back over to solid ground. "We've never even seen those before," Anesh admitted. "So, that's kind of cool. If that wasn't actually a trap, we should be on the lookout for that now, just in case." He sighed. "Assuming we don't figure out how to bury this place and decide to follow through." "The place is annoyingly useful," James reminded him. "This place is vile," Deb added. "Vile and annoyingly useful are not mutually exclusive," Anesh admitted. "Let's keep moving. We should be almost there, unless the pattern is really getting shaken up." The group reformed their marching positions and moved on. They didn't talk much, everyone getting quieter as they approached their destination. The concrete floor, now smooth and free of pipes, echoed the steps of their heavy boots and the rasp of frequencies slithering along. And the air cleared up a little bit, the scent of rot fading. When they could see the orange firelight ahead of them, the arena that guarded the exit, they stopped. Gear that wouldn't help in the fight, like Alana's glasses and Frequency of Sunlight's arms, were stowed back in the bags. A pair of thermoses were brought out, and reflex-enhancing coffee was shared around with all of them. One final check of the armor was done, and one final personal check, too. "You sure about this?" Alana asked James. "Yeah," he answered, instantly. "Because you were right when we talked earlier. I've been looking at this wrong." "Okay," she said, giving him a side hug as best they could while armored up and not wanting to make contact with anything in this place. "Just remember I could be wrong too, okay?" "Well, let's go find out," he said, and stepped forward into the rat-roach court. The space was mostly as it had been, half basketball court, half bloody arena. Somehow. The wire fence around the edge, the scoreboard overhead that was really just a collection of endlessly burning torches. James made a mental note to steal some of those, too. And as always, the rat roaches. 100 or more in the little stands, drawn from somewhere. They never seemed to appear in the tunnel of the dungeon itself. All of them were mismatched, with jutting extra limbs, scabs and matted fur, eyes that oozed with infected pus. They screamed and jeered as the party entered, a single lusting cry for blood and violence. In the court, on the rough gravel, 3 rat roaches stood waiting for them in particular. "You are back!" The one in the middle let out a screeching laugh. She towered over the other 2 now, changed again since the last time James had seen her. Almost 7 feet tall, fur and chitin seamlessly blended together. The lines of the infection at the joining points were a pale pink, almost a color accent in swirled spirals, rather than just a poisoned red. Her third arm was now more aligned, positioned under her primary right arm and looking strong enough to support rather than just get in the way. The 2 rat roaches to her side had similarly changed, but they eyed the approaching humans and Camerconda with somewhat less violent relish. One of them was also tall, wide as well, with a 4th and 5th arms jutting out from its back, while the other seemed to have narrowed in frame, grown thicker dark shell and an extra joint in its legs. "I have waited," the rat roach yelled. "Do you come to talk again?" "So here's the thing," Alana said, toeing the line of the bloodied gravel court as the others fell into a wedge position around her. "James thinks he's helping you when he does that, and he's probably not wrong. He's a good guy, but he misses things sometimes, you know? He sees you people down here and he thinks to himself, 'Oh, such a tragedy.'" Alana swooned, putting the back of a gloved hand to her forehead. "I must broaden their horizons, break their chains, offer them a true choice. And, okay, sure, good job, James. You've offered a choice to something that doesn't understand what choices are. Cool." "I don't sound like that," James grumbled next to her. "But also, yeah, I did do that." The rat roach in the center of the field hissed at her, a wet sound that flung droplets of blue spittle out of her cracked maw, impacting the gravel and hissing corrosively. Alana ignored it, shaking out the muscles of her calves. "Here's the thing," she reiterated. "James wants to treat you like peers, and you aren't. How old are you? A year? 2? I guess we don't really know, but he looked at you and he saw people his own size with language dripped into their heads that they don't fully understand, and he decided you were making poor choices. What everyone missed is that you are children." Alana's voice held no warmth in it anymore. It was iron and simmering anger. Not toward the rat roaches, the back 2 of whom had paused and were sharing glances with each other, but toward this place, this nightmare sewer that had created kids and forced them into this non-life. "You are just kids," Alana whispered, mostly to herself. "Scared, trapped, abused kids, and you don't look at a victim of child abuse and ask them if they want to stop being abused," she snarled. "I am not a victim," the rat roach in the middle screamed back. I fight, I kill, I worship happily. You think I am too new to be who I am, but I am complete." She shifted her feet, drawing furrows in the gravel floor, and hefted the spear in her right arms, a wicked-looking spike of shaved, rusted iron. She opened her mouth to say something else, when James stepped in. "Hey," he said, interrupting. The rat roach pivoted her head and fixed her multiple eyes on him. "Maybe that's true. You can be as much of a monster as you want. She wasn't talking to you." Then the rat roach froze, as frequency of sunlight also locked her gaze on the creature. The other 2, behind her, tensed up as James stepped forward, gravel crunching under his feet. There was something wrong with the vast majority of the rat roaches here. with most of the life forms here, really. In a way, they reminded James of the feral staplers in Officia Mundi. They weren't really made to be people, and even if the potential was there, it was a long road between your average, freshly minted stapler and someone like Rufus. With enough time, enough effort, a random dungeon monster could eventually become a person. But it took time, and they didn't stop trying to kill you between then and now. Here, in the Akashic Sewer, the issue seemed to be amplified 100-fold. The rat roaches were made, designed to be violent, to be angry, to be in pain all the time, to worship the dungeon that had made them like a god. James suspected that there was no amount of time that could turn a random rat roach into a person, even a shitty person that he could at least politely ignore from a distance. But beyond the 1 or 200 random mashed together rat roaches in this room, there were 3 that had changed, that had pushed past what they were, somehow, whether it was through dungeon-given gifts or some strange magic down here, or just a natural part of their life cycle. They'd changed, and of the 3, he'd only ever made the offer to one of them, and that one had been the one trying to actively murder him. "Been ignoring you two," he said to the vanguard rat roaches. "Even though you've both been growing. I can see it in your eyes. And, the rest of you." James paused as the 2 rat roaches moved around him, like they were getting into a flanking position, but tentatively. Behind him, his friends stayed back, though they were ready to move if needed. "Alana's mostly right," he said. "But I still think asking is important, so I'm going to ask first." He glanced to his side, met the eyes of the larger rat roach, the one with too many arms. More too many arms than normal. "Would you like to leave? You don't need to let her turn you into a weapon. We can just go, right now. We have somewhere safe and somewhere a hell of a lot more free than here." The rat roach stopped, like it was thinking about it. Then it did something that James hadn't actually been expecting. It walked around behind the white one and settled 2 of its 3-digit hands onto the shoulder of the other smaller rat roach, the 2 of them staring at each other for a second before turning back toward James and the others. The smaller one opened its mouth and pointed at its throat, only soft, wordless whines coming out. "Can fix that," Frequency of Sunlight said. "They are good at fixing things." "I think we can actually fix a lot of the pain you're probably in," Deb added, though she didn't look at them. She was busy scanning the teeming crowd around the chain-link fence. The other rat roaches were starting to shift, their cheers having gone silent as they watched, slowly getting more agitated over time. "Guys, we might need to move soon," she said quietly to the others near her, tightening her hands on her staff. Perhaps also sensing the way the less upgraded rat roaches around them were turning hostile, the 2 still cautiously watching James linked 2 of their hands together, their other hands dropping weapons to the floor with a scrape of metal on rock. They looked at each other, and then back at him, and slowly, together, nodded. "I had really hoped you would say that," James gave them a relieved smile. Then he turned just enough to call over his shoulder, "Deb, telepad." The young woman was already moving, the destination of the containment rooms in the basement of the lair having already been written in. It wouldn't be a permanent home, but it would be somewhere they could quarantine the 2 until they were sure it was safe to let them out without giving some kind of fungal infection to half of the city. With a wet hiss, the shorter one lunged forward toward James. If he hadn't been on high alert, dosed up with magical coffee, and also just a heavily modified human, the motion might have surprised him. But in his current state, James just pivoted and did what the rat roach was planning to do anyway, and plucked the thrown knife out of the air. The rat roach in the stands that had thrown it screamed at James. The rat roaches around him screamed at the rest of them. They were here to witness blood, violence, and death, not this. Not a casual offer of friendship. That was boring. "Deb, little faster, please." "On it." Deb slipped past James, followed by Sarah, and the 2 offered their hands to the rat roaches, one a little nervously and one with a beaming grin that shone through the dim light of the arena. "Okay, let's go," she said. The 2 of them gave the girls a curious look, but took the offered hands all the same. possibly the first time any of their species had ever done so. Then, as Deb and Sarah linked hands and tore the page of the telepad, the four figures were just gone. Now, for you, James turned on the white rat roach still frozen in the middle of the court. Well, shit. I mean, Alana's partly wrong. You're just a kid, kind of, but you're not really a victim, are you? There's only so many chances on offer, so we're... A pair of rat roaches jumped the fence and sprinted toward James. Anesh caught one of them and Alana hit the other, driving the unthinking creatures into the ground with sprays of blood. James, monologue time is over, Anesh called as more and more rat roaches started scrambling over each other to climb the chain link. He sprinted for the bank of damaged lockers against the far wall, intent on using the green sparks he'd collected, while James and Alana moved to flank Frequency of Sunlight as the Camerconda started rotating around the most dangerous foe on the field, heading toward the other side of the court and the exit door waiting for them there. Well, it's been fun, James yelled, slapping the thrown spear out of the air with his own staff. Sorry he didn't get a real fight. He had to raise his voice to be heard over the increasing screamed volume. Rat roaches now tumbling to the ground, breaking their own limbs and opening cuts in their skin in their rush to try to break Frequency's line of sight, to try to mob everyone who had come in from the outside. Anyone else want a free ride out of here? He yelled before one of them dove to try to knife the Camerconda that he was blocking for. No? Alright, fuck off. James wasn't really interested in playing fair with mindless dungeon constructs, and he took the legs out from underneath a charging creature before whipping his staff around to crunch into another one's midsection with a wet snap. A trio of purple orbs that boosted his speed in some way stacking to let him hit far harder than he should have. Anesh, he shouted. We're all good. Anesh ran back toward them, ducking just enough that when Alana flung her staff in a spinning motion over his head, it took out the rat roach time to grab him. Let's go. Go faster, Frequency of Sunlight added, as a dozen rat roaches interposed themselves between her and the white one, their leader letting out a zealot's bellow of rage and frustration. James turned and shoved the security door's bar, noticing with some concern that it drained over 50 red sparks out of him just to do so. He held it open for the others, letting them get through without paying the toll. And then they were back in the high school. The door clicked shut behind them, and the only noise left was hissing panting through the filter masks and James giving a nervous laugh as the adrenaline wore off. Okay, he said. Yeah, good call. I still think we should have taken Gretchen, too, Alana said. But I get why that might be a bad idea right now. Maybe next time. Mean Girls? James asked for clarification on the name. Yep. Anesh pulled his mask off and took a steadying breath. I've never seen that movie, he said. Is it good? You reference it a lot. James and Alana traded a look. We should watch Mean Girls, James decided. Maybe as some kind of date. But first, let's get back and check in with our new friends, Alana said. No, first, book, Frequency of Sunlight reminded them. That one, she stated, not indicating in any way which of the 3 books Anesh was holding she meant at all. Anesh looked down at the stack of bound paper he had in his hand. This one? He asked, offering one to her. Good enough, the Camerconda agreed, taking it in her fangs and gently setting it on the floor before flipping it open. A second later the book dusted away into nothing, and Frequency of Sunlight looked up at them. History, she declared. This will be easy. All history is new to me. I love how enthusiastic you are about that, James said with a smile. Want any podcast recommendations? James, all your podcasts are really weird deep references to a million different small things, Alana reminded him. Also, can we get out of here? Standing around in a school basement in body armor is making me feel really self-conscious. Good call. Podcast later. Frequency of Sunlight started up the ramp before the others, trusting the faster humans to catch up. Sounds like more of a threat than the dungeons, she said, synthesized voice unable to truly mutter, but still doing a great impression of it all the same. So, how are you adjusting to things? James asked Jean. The two of them were sitting in the dining space, James enjoying the constant flow of knights and aspirants as they shared a quick meal. Somewhere nearby, Ava had discovered that Anesh could change colors like a chameleon, and was busy trying to make that happen as often as possible, possibly so she could steal the technique. It's a lot, Jean said with a tired smile. Not in a bad way, but this place, these people are really something else, James. Yeah, that sounds about right, he agreed, looking down at the salad Nate had handed him. He could have sworn he'd asked for a sandwich. Was Nate trying to put him on a diet? James was pretty sure the chef didn't have that authority, or the interest in doing so. But, are you doing okay? He continued his line of questioning. I don't know, Jean sighed. It was... Please don't laugh at this, but it was fine when we were life and death, you know? When I had to adapt or my daughter died, I could handle anything. But now we're safe, my brain just isn't letting me catch up to the teleporting rescue teams, or the snakes with camera faces, or how much magic you have here. She looked up at him with a sharp stare as she pointed up at the windows. There's sunlight coming through windows that are physically blocked off from the outside. That's not normal. Frankly, I'm kind of surprised you went with the small lighting quirk and not the multiple overlapping basements, James admitted. You seem to be taking it well, though. Jean sighed. Ava loves it. That's all that matters. She's gone from looking forward to seeing her grandma to being sad she has to leave her new friends for a couple of days. She shook her head, but didn't lose the smile. She's never been happier. I think she wants to trade me for Sarah as her mom. Sarah would not make a good mom, James chuckled. Or, well, maybe she would, but I don't think she's in the market. Besides, she makes a better weird aunt, or some kind of distant Ms. Frizzle character. He bit into a chunk of cucumber and spoke around the bite of food. But how are you doing? Jean looked away. I'm fine. Wow, that was so obviously a lie, even I noticed, James said. Come on, spill. Jean looked down at her meal, like she was considering if she could time bites of food so she wouldn't have to speak, but then decided against it and talked anyway. Having nightmares, she admitted. Ava and I need to go home eventually, but I'm having nightmares. I'm scared to go outside. How am I supposed to be anywhere but here? It's weird, but it's also probably the safest place on the planet, right? James shrugged. I mean, I hope so. Probably not, though. But here is where I feel safe, Jean said. Or at least, where I can pretend there aren't any monsters. We tried to go on vacation and I nearly got my daughter killed. How am I supposed to let her out of my sight? Let her go to school, or leave her home while I go to work? A trio of Order members a couple tables over burst out laughing at a joke, and Jean flinched at the noise. I'm trying to hold it all together, but it's just too much sometimes. Have you talked to a therapist? James asked quietly. I'm not the best at it, but we have staff therapists. Sarah's a good listener if she has the time, but Texture of Bark Dust or Lua or Connie if you prefer a human face, they're actual trained professionals. I don't need therapy, Jean protested. I just need... Well, I don't know what I need. In the back of the lunchroom, a pair of alerts went off from a pair of Knight's phones, the human and camera-conda duo leaving their lunch and rushing to the response deployment, the dining area getting a bit louder as the people who noticed cheered for them. You could tell which of the two was new, because the cheering caused the camera-conda to awkwardly duck her head, while the human part of the duo just smiled and moved past. James waited for things to quiet down before answering. Therapy's not a bad word, he told Jean. Especially for things like this. You had your memories violated. That leaves painful holes that you need to explore. Ava too, honestly. Though, she might not have the same problem because of Hidden. I still talk to Connie every other week if I can. It's not bad to get help, you know. You do? Jean looked surprised. I kind of assumed you were more the standard macho hero type. James looked at her, and then looked down at the Cowboy Bebop t-shirt he was currently wearing, raised a hand to check and make sure he still had a 2-foot-long ponytail, then looked back at Jean. "What about any of me makes you think I'm some kind of figure of masculinity?" he asked incredulously. "You get in a lot of fights?" "I resolve half my fights by making friends with whatever is trying to kill me," James protested. In his pocket, his own phone buzzed, and he checked the message he'd just gotten. "Look, Connie has some free time. Since we've gotten the majority of Townsend survivors stabilized in new homes, talk to her, please. Set up an appointment. But I've got to go." "Another emergency?" No, not really. Someone just accidentally spawned a very specific model of server hardware in our basement, and Reed is asking for my help moving it." James cleared his throat. "So, it's probably okay?" "I don't know how big it is. Reed just said he needed help. That could mean a lot of things, honestly." Jean stared at him. "You know, sometimes I think this place just has drugs in all the food," she stated. "Impossible. I've barely touched my salad and I'm sharing this hallucination," James told her. "Also, we do have drugs here. They're just in the basement. And before you ask, no, obviously we're not giving your daughter drugs. Give me some credit, please." "Go deal with your waiter problem and stop loitering," Jean huffed at him. "And yes, I'll talk to a therapist. Tomorrow, though." "All right, I'm going to message her and tell her that you're going to drop by," James said, so that Jean couldn't get out of it, holding up his phone like a threat. "Have fun. And serve her like a computer thing, not like waitstaff. Later." He slid out from the bench he'd been sitting on and pivoted around the Camerconda, who was getting practice with their mechanized set of arms as an actual waitstaff-style server. "Thanks, Spire. Appreciate it," he called back as he walked out of the dining room. There was always something to do around here. James was lucky Sarah had a proper sleep balance, because if it weren't for her sharing naps with him, he wouldn't have been able to keep his eyes open for the past 3 days. James and Alana stood side by side, looking down over a field of carpet that blew like grass in the false wind of Officium Mundi's massive air conditioner units. They were at the top of a tower, the kind of tower that was the only place they could find the magical coffee that ran their duplicator. Behind them, Daniel yelped in pain as Anesh carefully wrapped a bandage around his ankle. "You knew what you were getting into," Anesh admonished him. "Misadventure, my buttocks." Alana cracked a smile, not turning around. "You know, I kind of feel the misadventure thing is a bit underrated. They're never lethal, right?" "I think they could be," James said, leaning forward on the ledge of the hole in the tower to look down at a quill dog rustling through the grass. "It's weird. I've actually got a map that's supposedly like Daniel's now, but it's not exactly alive. I want to go on the journey it offers sometimes, maybe see if I can impersonate it. Also, it's supposedly a good burger joint, but it hasn't told me if there's any misadventures in the way. Maybe it's like mana cost or something." "Weird way to price things," Alana snorted. "Like, what does one sprained ankle get you?" "Well, technically I don't think the boss fight counts as the misadventure," James said, eyes flickering over to the dead paper pusher. "I'm actually pretty sure that's just Daniel getting hit. This kind of thing has come up before." Alana gave him a sharkish grin. "Did you get hit by something?" "Can of soda." James did not elaborate further. "All right, we're good here," Anesh said behind them. "Alana, want to help me search the tower?" He extended the offer, casually leaving James to pair off with Daniel. Anesh noticed James's amused expression and stuck his tongue out at him as he followed their girlfriend down one of the ramps. "If we're lucky, we'll get a good 10 bags out of this," he said, as they vanished down into the stacked cubicles, searching for coffee. James wandered over to where Daniel was busy testing his foot and patted him on the shoulder. "Don't worry too much about it," he said. "Anesh isn't actually mad at you, and you're still, like, the most valuable person for this dungeon, hands down." James shrugged. "No pressure or anything." I know," Daniel sighed. "It's mostly fine, honestly. I like feeling useful, and Path likes going places, so this works out. Honestly, she's the most valuable person for the dungeon. I'm just here. It's just that—" "You wish it weren't so dangerous?" James asked into the silence. "Huh? Oh, no, that's fine. Daniel brushed off James's attempts to understand him, apparently oblivious to how much different his view on the dungeon was just a year ago. No, what's bugging me is, why are we here? Like, here back in the carpet grasslands of Officia Mundi, one of the more threatening biomes we have found so far? Or here in this tower full of magical coffee that powers our attempts to tell cancer to fuck off? Or... Actually, that's all I've got, James admitted. Just here, I guess. I don't know why Pathfinder told me there was something here, Daniel said. It's tower, James stated. We're trying to map all of these. He shook his head and blinked, trying to get his tired eyes to focus properly. I kind of figured that's why you led us here. No, see, that's the thing. Path is still telling me there's something here. Specifically here. It's not just the second projector, either. Daniel looked over at the device they had found that looked like it would be right at home in a normal middle school classroom. Maybe a slightly newer model than the one they had in their home base tower that duplicated matter. They'd found instructions for a slightly different ritual to make it work, and no information on what it did. They were in no hurry to test it today. That would be a job for research in the future. Daniel, right now, just looked back and continued. She's not talking to me, like a person. I'm just getting the background impression. Like there's a problem and a target all at once, and it's right here. James looked around. We cleared the tower, he said. There's nothing nearby. I can see that there's like a few quills down there on the ground, but we aren't about to get ambushed by something huge unless it's invisible. He hummed in thought. Weird. Sorry, I know it's hard to believe, but... We're in a magical infinite office. Chill, James told him. I believe you, I just don't... Somewhere, maybe 2 floors of cubicle below them, a phone started ringing. Daniel looked at him with a worried expression. That? James was already moving, sliding down the ramp and trying to lock on to the exact position of the sound. From below him, he heard Nesh and Alana also calling upward with similar noises of surprise, but they'd gone pretty far down so far, and James found the phone first. It was sitting on a desk that had already had its drawers tossed open, buried in a lopsided cubicle in the middle of the tower's floor, where the light didn't penetrate very much at all. The ringing guided James close to it, but it was the blinking red light that highlighted it. The phone was one of those older multi-line corded office phones that were basically everywhere in the 90s. James only paused for a couple seconds to wait for everyone to get a little closer to him before he answered it. Hello? He spoke down the line, much less afraid of a phone call in a dungeon now than he would have been before. The wheel turns, a distorted young girl's voice came through from the other end. The crash is averted. James gave a small smile as he recognized the voice and speech pattern of the road dungeon, which they had collectively dubbed Route Horizon. Yeah, I thought it might be you, he said. Glad we could help. And, hey, maybe as a thank you, tone down how lethal you are? If the dungeon heard him, or cared, it gave no indication. The sun dips on the horizon, the girl that wasn't a girl told him. Too much fuel burned, low on everything, asleep at the wheel. In his head, James put together pieces that he was being shown. The connection that the dungeon was trying to get across. It had done, perhaps, a little too much. It was going to take some downtime. What that meant, he didn't know, but it would be interesting to see what a sleeping dungeon was like. The others found James all at once, Anesh and Alana stepping aside to let Daniel limp into the cubicle next to James. James could see him coming, and could see why his partners let Daniel approach first. Pathfinder's wavy, feathered Fata Morgana form was lighting the air around his shoulders. James, Daniel gasped out. Can... He caught his breath, waving a hand up around where Pathfinder's had her own arm stretched out. Hey, James spoke down into the phone. Your daughter wants to talk to you. Do you have a minute for that? There was a pause, and James could feel emotional ripples of shock and confusion from the other end. Actually feel them. And then, annoyance. This is a solo ride, the girl's voice said, like it was trying to pretend to be a trucker. Watch the lines. No tampering with the cargo. 10-4, out. And then a click, and the line went dead. James looked down at the silent phone in his hand, and then up at Pathfinder's eager form. It hung up, he said. Pathfinder seemed to dim a bit, long peacock feathers swirling around Daniel ever so slightly. Daniel huffed a breath and tilted his head to listen to his partner's whisper before looking back to James. Dungeons can't really talk much, right? It... James didn't know how to phrase what he had been told. Part of him wanted to just lie, throw them a lifeline, let them think everything was fine, but that really wasn't what the dungeon had said. I think it doesn't... I'm sorry, Path, I don't think it cares. He felt his voice go rough as he tried to say the last part. Oh, Daniel said. Around him, Pathfinder stopped moving, stopped the little swirling motions, stopped the excited bobbing, and just sagged, dimmed and faded back into the background, feathers retreating back into Daniel's body. Oh, well that's... Wow, what a fucking shitty parent, Alana said bitterly, breaking the awkward, painful conversation like a hammer through plate glass. Hey, Path, if you want a better mom, I can legally adopt you, she said. Daniel answered in her place. She was just so excited. That's why she didn't say what was here. She was excited to talk to... Alana leaned back against Anesh, unsure of what to say now, since humor hadn't worked. James wasn't sure either, but he held out a hand where Pathfinder generally was. Hey, he said, mind racing to find the words he needed. I know there's no real replacement for the family you hoped for, but everyone in the Order likes you. We're here if you need someone to talk to. I don't know how that works for you, but we can figure it out. And if it makes you feel better right now, you're welcome to drag us into some kind of misadventure where I get dropped into one of those ink pits as recompense for not handling that conversation right. There was a flicker, a spark orange and yellow, and then a small whorl of light came back to life around one of Daniel's arms. She says thank you, Daniel passed on. Also, the misadventure on the way back apparently involves a lot of running, so that's nice to know. James, you are the kindest person I know, Alana told him. But I am letting you know right now in advance, I blame you for the running. He sighed. Go load the coffee and stuff into the cart. Let's see if we can beat the problem if we run fast enough. A thin orange wisp of feathered light flickered between the four of them, and he heard what could only be Pathfinder, giggling bubbly, echoing through the air. Bill, James wearily mumbled, I have had a long week. My partners are waiting for me. I haven't slept in 3 days. I haven't showered in a day and a half because of dungeon time dilation. I have to be up tomorrow to go do a recruiting thing and check the Taunton progress. What's up? Can this be fast? Funny you should mention showering, Bill stated with a broad grin, not bothering to contain his enthusiasm. James shook his head, trying not to smell himself. No, it isn't. I promise. Follow me, Bill laughed as he turned and headed to one of the stairwells. We need a cargo elevator in this place, by the way. Or some kind of magic thing. Not really my department, but I'm sure you can come up with a magic thing. His boots made echoing concrete thumps on the stairs as he led James down into the basement. Moving the materials was the hard part. Hard part of what? James was more confused than concerned. Honestly, the idea that he should be concerned at all hadn't really entered his head. Is this going to be some kind of giant bed? Because I would be okay with that. Not quite, though we are working on designing camera-conda nesting spaces, Bill admitted, apparently oblivious to the fact that maybe he was as immersed in the magic as everyone else. Though it is a giant something. Bill, please, James rubbed his eyes. I am so tired. You'll like this, Bill promised, walking ahead through the decorated concrete corridors of the residential floor. James didn't really have the energy to argue, so he just followed along, taking a couple more turns and one really long hallway that he'd only been down once or twice, until eventually... "Isn't this where the gold vein was?" James asked as they came to a door at the end of an intersection that looked like it was carved out of soapstone, and, more importantly, to where a pair of Anesh and Alana were standing around. The three of them grinned at him as Bill led him to the door. "Did something weird happen again?" James asked. "Again?" both present Aneshes questioned. At the same time, Alana snorted. Like it ever stopped. "So," Bill said with an attention-grabbing clap of his hands. "Turns out some of the greens aren't permanent. Maybe. But Karen had me and Jim excavating kind of a lot of this space looking for more gold before we... You don't need to know. Point is, we had a big, open, somehow structurally stable space and a bit of free time." "You liar," James accused him. "Where did you find free time?" Bill glared at the interruption. "Also, it turns out you can make a remodel go pretty fast when you got a few toys that let you cheat. And when you, I think on purpose, hired the best plumber in the state." He stepped past them and pressed both hands on the double doors. "Anyway, my kid really likes Harry Potter, so if you want to blame someone for the design, it's her fault." He gave a push, and the doors slid smoothly open on oiled tracks. The room beyond was like something out of a fantasy. And that was kind of impressive for someone like James, who could say that about most of the places he visited on a weekly basis. But this fantasy, in particular, would have been one from someone who had spent the last 3 years looking at home improvement catalogs, drooling over color swatches, and dreaming of the time when they owned a home and had an infinite budget to screw around with. The space was roughly the size of an Olympic swimming pool, with rounded-off corners and a slightly rough white stone making up the floor in what looked like an unbroken single piece. The swimming pool comparison was apt because the center of the space was a sunken basin, full of clear water, divided into 4 quarters by a river-stone wall running through the middle. Overhead, a seemingly intentional maze of copper-plated pipes fed waterfalls and drains. The piping shared space with orange, red, and blue lamps that cast shimmering light across the whole room. The walls were rougher stone, though one was taken up by a colorful tile mosaic. A mosaic of a very familiar-looking stapler, actually, with one pen leg held over his eye, the image far larger than life. Hanging racks and what looked like heated towel holders also sat by the sides of the walls. A few parts looked mismatched, like the white wire baskets around the pools, or the not quite finished mount points for what would obviously be faucets in the future. But... "You built a wizard bath," Alana breathed out, eyes glittering with excitement. "There's a few technical things you'll appreciate," Bill said, pointing around the room. "We got different heating controls for each section. There's a raisable barrier in the middle for privacy. Still working on the atmosphere settings, but we'll get there. Piping for soaps and stuff's in the works, too. Modeled a lot of the earlier pool design off of Japanese hot springs. Onsens?" Bill pronounced the word like he'd read it, but never actually said it out loud. What else? Oh, you know that brooch Knife wears around?" James rolled that sentence over in his head for a minute. "Knife and fangs? Refresh my memory." "Thing purifies food. Turns out it counts water as food." Bill gave a shrug. "Got a copy made, hanging on the wall over there. It's our main cleaning tool. 0 chemical waters." He pointed to one of the bare walls. "Left a couple spaces for future art. I'm not much of an artist." "Rufus seems to disagree." James grinned at the mosaic of his Strider friend. "Yeah, it's kind of a mess." Bill rubbed the back of his head. "Anyway, it's not done. Still haven't set up the changing areas. We probably need some safety features and all that, but it's done enough, and you looked like you could use a break." How did you do all this?" James marveled, stepping into the warm and slightly humid room. "I was gone for a week." "Well, people were asking for showers when I first got here," Bill said. "So a few of the other new hires and I decided to make ourselves useful, you know? And I don't know if you know, but time's kind of messy around here. Also, it's kind of scary how much you can get done when you got camera condos to hold stuff in place while you run pipe." Alana practically ripped her shirt off over her head, causing Bill to rapidly turn back toward the door and clear his throat awkwardly. "James! Bath!" she yelled excitedly. "It's perfect!" Anesh chuckled as the two of him stepped past Bill, one of him offering a fist bump that the older man returned. "This is amazing, thank you," he said quietly. James also turned back to shoot the embarrassed man a grin, while Alana threw the rest of her clothes off and then herself into the nearest pool at high speed, bare feet making slapping noises across the stone floor. "This is the coolest shit I have seen today," he said, ignoring Alana's bellowed yelp at the realization that she had chosen a cold pool, and in so doing had chosen poorly. "And Bill, I need you to know how impressive that is," James added. "Yeah, well," Bill shrugged. Man," James cut him off, "I have spent the last 20 years mastering self-depreciation, and the last year trying to break away from all that. I know it's hard, but seriously, this is fucking awesome. You made something awesome, and weirdly fitting for our microculture. It's okay to be a bit proud." "Heh," Bill shook his head. "Aren't I supposed to be the wise one? I've got more than a decade on you, kid." "Yeah, but I've been going to therapy," James said, hearing another splash behind him, joyous shouts from his partners catching up to him. "Anyway, I'm going to go enjoy this." "Have fun," Bill told him, tilting his head just enough to show a grin. "Don't break anything," he said, pulling the doors close on their oiled tracks. "Ha!" James waved a hand, making a piffing noise. "I'm immune to broken bones." "Oh, I didn't mean you." The last words caught him before Bill shut the doors completely. James looked over the overlapping colored lights playing off the water with a smile that threatened to spill over into tears of joy. In one of the pools, rapidly heating up from the dial that Anesh had adjusted, Alana tackled the other Anesh into the water with a splash. The whole place just looked, well, perfect. It was creative, brightly colorful, copper and stone giving it a burnished and cultured look. It wasn't done, no, but it would be, eventually, and James couldn't wait to see what it would look like. But until then, he started pulling off clothing and went to join his partners. He hadn't been lying when he'd told Bill he hadn't showered in a day or so, and everyone would probably appreciate it if he made use of some of the soap and hot water in this colorfully lit grotto, a brand new strange little bathhouse, built out of a cavern, carved out of a basement, underneath the strangest place James had ever worked.